Good morning. The December 21st Board of Education meeting is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Minutes are approved. Item 2.04 is establish agenda order, and the agenda stands as published. Item 2.05 are recognitions, and we have two this morning. The first is a presentation by Lucia Martin.
Good morning and happy holidays. Good morning. I'm Lucia Martin, Coordinator of School Counseling, and I have the pleasure of introducing this morning's first board recognition. Before I begin, I would like to ask members of the board and Dr. Arlotto to come forward. Members of the board and Dr. Arlotto, this morning we are fortunate to recognize an outstanding group of Anne Arundel County Public Schools graduates who earned 2016 scholarships from the Bill Belichick Foundation. There were 32 total winners nationwide, and 6 of these came from Anne Arundel County. Each of these scholar athletes has a unique story to tell. These 6 students are now college freshmen, home for the holidays, and are proudly representing AACPS in 6 different states, from Maryland to Michigan. I don't think I have to remind you that Bill Belichick is the head coach of the New England Patriots and the winningest active coach in the NFL. In fact, he has the 4th most wins in the history of the league. As importantly for us, however, Coach Belichick grew up in Annapolis and is a graduate of Annapolis High. Coach Belichick was a 2-sport star at Annapolis High, where he played football and lacrosse. His dad, Steve Belichick, was a longtime coach at the Naval Academy. In 2013, Coach Belichick's foundation was started to replace the one his late father had in place. The intention was to honor 15 deserving scholar athletes across the country each year with $2,500 awards, and to reserve at least one of those spots for an Annapolis high school grad. To qualify, an applicant had to maintain a high GPA while playing 2 or more varsity sports. Due to the generosity of the foundation, the scholarships increased from 15 to 32 this year, and the awards doubled to $5,000 per student because of the quality of the applicant pool. Scholarship winners each received a letter that read in part, "We established this scholarship to support high-achieving leaders of tomorrow, leaders who exhibit the values of the Belichick family, a love of sports, coaching and team building, both in the classroom and in their athletic accomplishments." This year's list of impressive winners includes 4 2016 graduates from Annapolis High School and 1 each from Severna Park and South River High Schools. The local winners are Damon Edwards, Janity Madeira, Nicholas Mejia, Bridget Ralph, Juliana Rankin, and Skylar Simmers. Damon Edwards played baseball and competed in track and field at Annapolis while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Earlier this year, he was named Maryland's American Legion Baseball Scholar Athlete of the Year. Damon is currently majoring in mechanical engineering at Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania and is an outfielder for the Blue Jays baseball team there. Nicholas Mejia is a student at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, where he is majoring in sociology and is a member of the spring track team. He was on the varsity basketball, track, and football teams in high school and maintained a 3.8 GPA. He also won the Hoppy Adams Scholarship while at Annapolis High. Bridget Ralph was planning to be here but had to attend an IB ceremony taking place at this exact time at Annapolis High School. Bridget is a student at the University of Notre Dame, where she majors in mathematics and is part of the school's Naval ROTC program. At Annapolis High, she was part of the swim and volleyball teams as an IB student with a GPA above 4. She also won the Elks Lodge and the NROTC scholarships. 3 of the other scholar athletes who couldn't be with us this morning are Janady Madeira, a soccer and softball player at Severna Park High School, who's majoring in criminal justice at Bridgewater College in Virginia and is a forward on the college's soccer team. She also won the Officer Grant Turner Memorial Scholarship. Juliana Rankin, who is also at the IB ceremony right now, is currently a student at Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts. Skylar Simmers is attending Grand Valley State University in Michigan. All 32 winners have been invited to attend a dinner in their honor at Foxborough, Massachusetts in May with Coach Belichick and many of the foundation's sponsors. It's also worth mentioning that the twin daughters of our Chief Operating Officer, Alex Cheknovich, who are proud graduates of South River High School, each won a Belichick scholarship last year. As Damon comes forward, please join me in congratulating him on a job well done.
Very impressive, sir.
Congratulations, John. Well done.
Nice job.
Good morning. I'm Deb Albert, Coordinator for Career and Technology Education, and I'm pleased to present this morning's second board recognition. Like you, I am incredibly proud of the opportunities we provide at our 2 Centers of Applied Technology in Edgewater and Severn. Each year, thousands of students receive state-of-the-art instruction at our campuses in Severn and Edgewater, with our graduates going on to top-flight career-oriented institutions and excelling in the workforce. Today, we are here to celebrate one of those programs. The Information Technology Networking Academy at the Center of Applied Technology South, led by Jason Kaler for the last 3 years, the program prepares students to compete for top-flight jobs in information technology fields like cybersecurity, not just across the country, but around the world. So, how successful has it been, you might ask? CAT South students enrolled in the ITNA program have routinely placed high in regional and national competitions. In addition, every Academy student over the last 3 years has successfully completed at least 2 industry certification exams and earned a minimum of 3 college credits while at Cat South. Others around the world are taking notice as well. Earlier this year, the networking firm Cisco has honored the Cat South program as its Academy Curriculum Excellence Award. The award is presented annually by the Cisco Academy to only one institution in each of Cisco's 6 worldwide regions. It recognizes superior delivery of the Cisco Network Associate Curriculum. Cat South won the award for the global region that includes all of the United States and Canada, beating out high schools and community college academies for this award in both nations. Cat South Principal Tom Islands, instructors Jason Kaler and Chris Doring, and several Cat South students are with us this morning. Please join me in congratulating them as they come forward for the outstanding work they do every day.
Okay, guys, 3 photos. Look at this way, please. Quick smile.
Item 2.06 is school and community highlights. Mrs. Nally.
I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Annapolis Elementary School for the Elementary National Honor Society Awards. I was there because my grandson was inducted into the Elementary National Honor Society. My other grandson was inducted last year. So I want to commend Annapolis Elementary School for really presenting the opportunity for this Elementary School Leadership Award. Thank you. It was a wonderful ceremony, and I appreciated it very much.
Mrs. Hummer.
So last week I had the pleasure of helping out with the holiday shop at Brockbridge Elementary. And if you've never helped out at a holiday store at an elementary or middle school, especially elementary, you should do it. There's nothing that gets you in the holiday spirit more than helping a 5-year-old pick out presents for their grandparents and telling them no, they don't want silly putty. And it's just a great time, and it really leaves you very fired up for the holidays. And I also attended a chorus concert at Monarch Global and winter concert at Glen Burnie High School that were wonderful, especially the jazz group at Glen Burnie High School was just wonderful. So all great things to get in the holiday spirit.
I had the chance to go to the Arundel Middle School Science Fair and look at all the projects, and my favorite was the student who wanted to see if cats were attracted to cat food based on the color of the food, and evidently if you have cats you need to give them blue cat food. And then a little birdie told me that today is Julie and John Hummer's 20th wedding anniversary, so on behalf of her children I am wishing you both a very happy anniversary.
Thank you. I'm spending my anniversary with the school.
Right. Item 2.07 is the CRASC report.
Good morning, President Korbelak, Dr. Arlotto, and other members of the board. My name is Christina Dyson, and I'm the second vice president of CRASC. This past month, on December 5th, CRASC partnered with Avid to introduce new students to our programs and recruit future executive staff leaders and officers. This Rookies in the Lead event was a success. We presented a variety of workshops, from What is CRASC to What is SMOB, and a workshop titled Work It, about finding pathways to express your voice and work your activism as a student. In January, we will be having an inaugural event here at the Board of Education, inviting students to watch one of the most important proceedings in our country. As winter break approaches, and as it gets a little colder, I wanted to conclude this report by saying thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you. Same to you guys. 2.08, the CAC report. Don't believe we have one today. And 2.09, the PTA report. No report today. Well, next up is the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2018 operating budget and capital budget. And before, or as Dr. Arlotto goes down, I'd like to welcome our county executive who's in the audience today for the budget.
All right. Ready? Good morning, President Korbelak, Vice President Hummer, members of the Board of Education, elected officials, colleagues, students, parents, and county residents. A budget message, for obvious reasons, contains plenty of facts and figures about the people and programs of a given agency or organization. This message is no different, but first I want to talk about another type of message, one delivered in 4 simple letters: H-O-P-E. Hope. Hope is indeed a very powerful message. It's one that speaks very loudly to and about our children, who are the very reason we wake up every day and do what we do. Hope, in fact, is exactly the message that we, as staff, as parents, and as government and community partners, must instill and enhance in every one of our more than 81,000 students every day. Without hope, the achievement of true potential for any child is not just difficult, it is nearly impossible. Hope, to be clear, is not wishing for some magical result. Hope is, at its core, our children not only seeing themselves as successful adults, but believing in their abilities and seizing their opportunities to get to those places. Our children, ladies and gentlemen, must expect that they can be awesome. One of educational activist Diane Ravitch's books contains a thought that I believe holds very true for us as we carry out our mission every day. She wrote, "The most durable way To improve schools is to improve the lives of children, families, and communities. In short, we have to give our children, every one of them, hope. We have to help them not just understand, but believe. Believe in themselves, believe in each other, believe in the adults around them, and most importantly, believe that their potential has no boundaries. A budget, ladies and gentlemen, isn't a document. It is an investment in the hopes of our children, and I assure you there is great hope inside each one of our children. You have seen it in your visits to schools, and I see it every day. Our children hope to learn rounding, hope to engage and expand their music skills, and hope to engage in more STEM lessons. Ask them, and they'll tell you that they hope to grow up to be a soccer player, an artist, a pharmacist, an engineer, a chef, a computer scientist, a teacher, or a plumber. And if you really question our students, you will almost certainly get to their most sincere hope. They hope to make their family proud. Hope, like potential, is both limitless and innate. Artificial constraints, biases, and arbitrary judgments are not things possessed by children at birth. They are walls imparted by a society that too often oppresses and demeans people instead of focusing on curbing poor decisions and actions. In far too many cases, these walls subtly predetermine how far a child can go or the heights to which they can soar. I submit to you that it is our duty, all of us, to tear down those walls before they become cemented, faulty foundations upon which the futures of our children are built. We must collectively embrace our children and, to coin a phrase used by community members who have greeted and encouraged students outside Annapolis High School over the last few weeks, let them know we have their backs. We must, wherever possible, bring parents into our schools and put programs into place that meet them where they are and enable them to better support their children. That is exactly the idea behind the Hispanic Moms Club at Tyler Heights Elementary School, which has been meeting for the last 3 years. Led by the school's bilingual facilitator and school counselor, the group discusses topics such as homework help and communication skills. It also provides Hispanic mothers with the opportunity to build relationships with each other and expand their network of support. Last year, it received the John Nelson Family Engagement Award from the Maryland English Language Learner Family Involvement Network, and this year it has been used as the model for programs at 5 more schools in the county. Our singular goal to elevate all students and eliminate all gaps isn't some catchy phrase. It is and must be the underpinning of everything we do. It must be present in every employee we hire and every program we implement. Our children, all of them, deserve that. They deserve people like Alvin Talley, the longtime and beloved chief custodian at Bodkin Elementary School. Mr. Talley's weekly hip hip hooray encouragement to scores of students at the school's Good Citizen celebration reinforces their belief in themselves not only while they are in classes at Bodkin, but after they've moved on to middle school, high school, and beyond. Mr. Talley's spirit embodies the school system's growth mindset model and District 203 initiative, through which schools cultivate the reality that every single classroom and office is a place where children can feel comfortable, supported, and encouraged. That encouragement is accompanied by a philosophy that the mastery of a piece of content is not always instantaneous endeavor. Rather, it is a student's relentless pursuit of that mastery, the not yet instead of the I can't mentality, reinforced by our incredible teachers, counselors, administrators, and other school staff, that turns adversity into achievement. Our intentional focus on early literacy exemplifies this approach perfectly. Across our county, 47% of second graders who tested below grade level, sometimes multiple levels, in reading last fall had reached or exceeded grade level by the spring. That is a testament not only to our incredible reading and classroom teachers, but to every person in our system who interacts with students on a regular basis. As a result of their efforts, nearly 1,000 more third graders began this school year at or above grade level in reading and were focused on advancing instead of catching up, not just in that subject, but others as well. If we as a school system are ever to eliminate all our gaps, one class at a time, that is how we must do it. One student at a time, one class at a time, one grade at a time, one school at a time, and one community at a time. That community spirit is exemplified in the Baltimore Coast Guard Command's Partnership in Education program, in which more than 100 Coast Guard personnel have served as mentors in 12 county schools over the last several years. This program, and ones like it, are crucial additions to the incredible work our school-based staffs do with students every day. In addition to academic support, these programs provide students with more adult role models and alternative places to turn to for advice and discussion. As we continue to focus on the academic needs of our students, we must pay increasing attention to their social and emotional wellness. While there are those that may argue that such efforts are not for a school system to undertake, the simple fact is this: our students are coming to our classrooms with more diverse and, in some cases, more intense needs than ever before. Their lives away from the school setting are, in many cases, difficult and stressful, to say the least. They are exposed to things in their first few years that many adults don't encounter in their first several decades, and the ability to provide both coping skills and stability in the home lives of students is challenging. So more and more students and their families are turning to our schools for help. We could adopt the not our job philosophy, but the failure to at least help address those needs would only compound the difficult task our educators face every day. As a society, it's easy for us to rally around, for example, efforts to stamp out hunger. There are near universal understanding about and compassion for a child who worries about where his or her next meal is coming from and can't fully focus on schoolwork. There are other situations, however, for which our need to support students garners far less understanding and support. We have students who are homeless or whose home lives are unsettled. Students who witness violence and drug activity on a regular basis, and students whose family situations provide little emotional or academic support. We have students whose native language is not English, students with sexual orientation and gender identity issues, and students who silently attempt to cope as best they can with anxiety or depression. Our obligation is never to place value judgments on the situations children encounter on their way to our schoolhouse doors. Rather, it is to do everything we possibly can to support them, to give them hope, if you will, once they get to us, and very simply, to be nice. All must mean all, and we must firmly, very firmly, reject any notion that would dictate otherwise. As Severna Park resident Betsy Gonzalez wrote in an email to me recently, it is comforting to know that our schools are providing the students with a safe, supportive, and inclusive environment. There is so much more to an education beyond Common Core and language arts. My husband was born in Mexico, and both our children are adopted from Mexican birth parents, so we gladly welcome the conversation in the classroom about diversity and appreciation of the acceptance of those with differing views. We must also, wherever possible, do what we can to help students make positive choices that best suit their career aspirations. That's one of the main factors in our proposal now before this board to eliminate the all too often unhealthy course selections high school students make in the quest to rank first in their class by replacing the valedictorian and salutatorian system with a Latin honors system. This system rewards students for success while simultaneously encouraging them to seek expanded academic and extracurricular paths. Our efforts to support the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students must be met with equal efforts to support our hardworking and dedicated employees. The work we do on behalf of our children is done efficiently, very efficiently. When it comes to the ratio of non-instructional staff to students, for example, we are the third leanest school system in the state of Maryland. That lean administrative overhead ratio is a result of focusing our funding on people who have contact with students every day. I repeat to everyone listening today what I said a year ago. My colleagues are the backbone of our success. We must, to the very best of our ability, advocate for their needs. Our advocacy, however, must be tempered with fiscal reality. The $1.16 billion operating budget that I am proposing to this board today represents a 3.8% increase from our fiscal year 2017 budget. That increase includes $20.5 million allocated to our healthcare fund and $15.6 million targeted for employee compensation increases. The level of compensation funding in this request is equivalent to a full step increases for all eligible employees, as well as increases for all employees not otherwise eligible for steps. The exact nature of any increases for employees and bargaining units will be determined through the negotiations processes with those entities. As I said, our advocacy must be practical and must be done with an awareness of the fiscal realities that exist in our state and county. We must recognize the efforts of county government, particularly in the last 2 years, to assist in meeting our needs as best it can. A year ago, for example, County Executive Steve Shue worked with us to secure approval from the Maryland State Department of Education to allocate $10 million outside of the maintenance of effort provisions to assist with serious structural issues in our health care fund. As part of that allocation, which was ultimately approved by the County Council and included in our current year budget, we assured MSDE that we would undertake substantive revisions to our health care plan. Those discussions must include a collaborative approach from all of our bargaining units to identify more than $20 million in cost avoidances or revenue enhancements to support health care costs if we are to be successful in returning that fund to solid footing and avoiding more drastic actions such as furloughs or reductions in force. We are continuing to examine all of our budget line items and, wherever possible, directing resources to the health care fund to help ensure its solvency. While the health care plans offered to our employees are rarely discussed publicly, they are an important and integral part of compensation packages. Keeping our health care fund on sound footing affords our employees not only access to excellent medical services, but an array of preventative care options to help them maintain a high quality of life. We also must continue to focus on our instructional needs, and my request includes $6.8 million to open the Monarch Academy Annapolis Public Contract School in September. Monarch will ease overcrowding in Annapolis schools and provide a program of choice that does not currently exist for elementary students in the Annapolis cluster. It will also provide a pathway to our International Baccalaureate Middle Years program at Annapolis Middle School and our Performing and Visual Arts program at Bates Middle School. This has been a logistically difficult road to navigate, and I want to thank County Executive Shue, the Children's Guild, and developer Steve Shaw for their continued commitment and tireless efforts to clear the obstacles that presented themselves in this process. I spoke earlier about the needs to address increasing issues related to social and emotional wellness of our students. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not an issue isolated to our county. and it is far more than a school issue. It is a public health issue, and we must do our part to address it. This request contains $3.3 million for 35.4 positions to assist in achieving this goal. Those positions include 23 teachers and aides for special education students, 5 assistant principals for elementary schools, allowing counselors and reading specialists to concentrate on their areas of expertise instead of administrative functions, 3 school psychologists, 1 social worker, and 3.4 counselors to provide full-time counselors at 3 additional elementary schools and 1 early education center. Let's be clear. Better addressing the needs of our children in this way is not lowering expectations for our students. Rather, it is raising the ability of children to appropriately cope with the many stressors in their lives and react accordingly. It is also clearly an emotional benefit to our great teachers who can focus more on instruction with fewer distractions and less stress. My request also includes $2.5 million for an additional 33 classroom teachers to address enrollment increases and $762,000 for 10 teachers to continue to reduce class sizes. I've also included $216,000 for 4 community ambassadors to serve as additional supports and resources and to provide critical links between schools and communities they serve. We have refined these positions to formalize the structure and ensure that the community ambassadors are present both in schools and communities so that they can help forge strong bonds for our students. The number of English language learners our school system is educating continues to surge, with 570 more students this year than a year ago. That's a 14% increase, and we simply have to add staff to continue to try to meet the needs of these students and their families. My request includes $763,000 for 10 English language acquisition classroom teachers and $125,000 for 2 additional bilingual facilitators to undertake the critical work of collaborating with families of these students. We must also continue to enhance the opportunities we offer our students, and this request contains $1.4 million to do exactly that. Approximately $1 million is allocated to funding 10.5 positions to expand the Triple E program to the 7 elementary schools in the Old Mill cluster. Old Mill will be the 6th cluster in our system with Triple E, which not only provides students with an additional subject of study, but affords elementary school teachers with crucial additional planning time. Another $134,000 is allocated for 1.5 positions to address enrollment growth at existing Triple E schools, and $152,000 will fund 2 positions to expand the Central Middle School STEM program to the 8th grade. For our students to excel in all the ways we envision, we need to continue to upgrade, and update the environments in which they learn. In the next month or so, 2 of the schools we have long worked on, a Severna Park High and a modernized Benfield Elementary, will be complete. Funding of the $238.6 million capital budget request that I present to you today will allow us to continue to improve the instructional settings for thousands more students. Included in my request is more than $176 million for construction and/or design funding at Manorview, High Point, George Cromwell, Jessup, Arnold, Edgewater, Tyler Heights, and Richard Henry Lee elementary schools, as well as for the new Crofton Area High School. In addition, this request includes $7.5 million for pre-kindergarten and kindergarten additions at Park and Shadyside Elementaries, and $1.1 million to renovate the Carrie Whedon Science Center building in Galesville as we prepare to open an early education center there. I've also included $7 million for open space enclosures at Brockbridge and Shadyside Elementary Schools, and $6 million for classroom additions at Marley and Solly Elementary Schools. In both the operating and capital budgets, I truly would have liked to do more. However, as I said earlier, we must develop responsible budget requests that fund core priorities while recognizing the fiscal realities in which we operate. More than $51.7 million in requests from department heads, every penny of them worthwhile and justified, had to be eliminated as we crafted this budget. This board, County Executive Shue, and the County Council will have some difficult decisions to make between now and June, when our final budget for the coming year is adopted. As those decisions are deliberated and discussed, we must keep foremost in our minds the images of the children who occupy the most important seats in our school system, those in the classroom. I leave you with the thought espoused 5 centuries ago by the master artist Michelangelo. Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. Ladies and gentlemen, across our county every day, in more ways than you and I could ever count, we are discovering the great masterpieces that exist in our children. To be content, however, with simple discovery would be to fail our children. Instead, we must unceasingly believe in the greatness of every child and relentlessly endeavor to sculpt, refine, enhance, and empower the hope in all of our children that will help them reach their full potential. I thank you for allowing me to be part of this endeavor.
Thank you. Are there any board questions or comments? I have 2 public comments, Lisa Van Buskirk and Kristen Etzel.
Good morning, board and Dr. Arlotto. This will be a bit disjointed since I'm reacting to the presentation. So I like the idea of hope, but hope comes from getting enough sleep and being ready to learn. Hopelessness comes from being chronically sleep deprived, which leads to our higher than normal or higher than Maryland averages of suicide, depression, and drug use. So when you talk about social and emotional wellness, and students need coping skills so that they don't make bad decisions, then the first step to that is not being chronically sleep deprived. So coping skills is equal to sleep. So we hope that you will add in money, because I do not see it mentioned, about changing the school hours, because we know that the 13 minutes and the 15-minute slide that we're doing right now is not the best solution. But I see no mention of correcting that for the late elementaries and fixing it for the early high schools. In the $1.16 billion budget. I know that you say that advocacy must be practical, but we've been advocating for on and off 20 years now for healthy and safe start times. And so I understand the fiscal realities, but when are the realities of the early start times going to be addressed? You talk about the health care plans for the teachers, but what about a health care plan for the students? That's your middle and your elementary and your high school students, making sure they all have developmentally appropriate hours and have the sleep that they need to be able to function. Their health needs to be addressed as well. You talk about public health in the schools under the guise of the social and emotional wellness, and I'm happy to see public health as part of the education policy, but again, where is sleep as part of that public health unawareness? I hope that as you look at the entire budget, you'll look at my handout that I have, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs as applies to education. For those who don't know who Maslow is, his hypothesis is that people are continuously striving for personal fulfillment and goals, and lower order goals need to be met before moving to higher growth needs. So I ask you to analyze all of these budget requests under that disguise? Do they support the lower order physiological and safety needs of the students, or are they aiming for the higher needs? In which case, that's kind of pointless because you need to meet all of the students' lower needs first. And that includes teachers' lower needs too with their budget, whatever. So last, well, two more things. In a report released yesterday by the Center for American Progress, the authors found that the National Assessment of Education Progress math scores for 8th graders rose by as much as 8 points in middle schools if they are delayed an hour, and a full grade increase is equivalent to 10 points. So they hypothesized, they looked at middle schools and the role of later start times for academic performance. I often talk a lot about the public health issues, but there is an academic element to the start times. So I want you to think about that. And then lastly, my letter to the editor in the Capitol and also my testimony from 2 weeks ago outlined what I was expecting Dr. Arlotto's budget to include. Healthy and safe school hours were a priority. Why is a priority? Addresses community concerns and is for the 2018-2019 school year, and use of software. So I would say he failed in meeting any of my expectations. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Arlotto, President Korbalak, and members of the board. My name is Kristen Etzel. I'm the organizer of the Fund Old Mill School Construction Group. As this is my 4th time this school year coming to speak up for Old Mill Schools, I imagine you recognize me at this point. In reacting to the budget just presented, I'm disappointed, obviously, not hear any mention of the Old Mill Schools or Rippling Woods Elementary School as being included in the fiscal 18 budget. Old Mill Schools have had funding promised in years past and delayed. Old Mill Schools were listed as a #1 priority in the 2006 MGT study, and then we had the 2015 MGT study, and we're listed as 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. However, last year's budget projected that in 2018 we would start to see some of those design and construction funding begin in 18, and now that we're discussing 18's budget, it's pushed to 19. I'd like today to give you an update on our group's progress. I have 2 other group members here with me today, Jennifer Brienza and Rachel Jennifer, who have been instrumental in helping me get the word out to the community. Rachel has been a liaison to the PTA at Ridgeway Elementary, which feeds into Old Mill. Jennifer has been speaking at the Old Mill Middle North PTA. I've spoken with PTAs at Rippling Woods, Quarterfield Elementary, as well as Old Mill High School. In addition, I've spoken at the Village of Old Mill Community Association. We've used the website and Facebook to increase our outreach. We've received a lot of interest, and our group is gathering momentum. We hope to have many supporters at the upcoming January 10th public hearing regarding the budget. We're in this for the long haul, and we will follow the budget process throughout, including speaking at county executive budget hearings and the county council meetings. Again, last year, the board's projected budget for fiscal 18 included feasibility and design funding for Quarterfield and Rippling Woods Elementary, as well as the new Old Mill West High School. Now that the fiscal year budget 18 is currently under review, we've been delayed another year, and it's not indicated, at least at last viewing, was not indicated to begin until fiscal year 19. We want to see the design and construction funding for Old Mill Complex Master Plan schools begin in fiscal year 18 instead of 19, and see the corresponding funding and the projected 6-year plan to shift it up accordingly as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on these items at this time?
Can they have them right now while I'm? Okay, great. Hello, President Korbalak, Dr. Arlotto, and members of the board. Thank you for being here. My name is Janet Norman. I'm an Annapolis Middle and Annapolis High parent. Also, forgive the disjointed comments as I'm also reacting to the budget. What I'm handing out to you right now is a reminder from the Centers for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics, who've endorsed this, our nation's doctors, are reminding you that the consequences of sleep deprivation and early high school start times that we still currently are the earliest in the state of Maryland are doing to our kids. And I want you to focus on that. And as Lisa has mentioned, the Maslow's order of social and emotional needs that you're attempting to take care of. You can't do that without having a healthy foundation of sleep. As my IB student just reminded me this morning, he could give no mild expletive about school today and didn't care that he had a physics test because he was so freaking tired. And that's someone with ultimate supports at home who's driven into school to get half an hour more sleep every day than his disadvantaged peers, and someone who's competitive about his grades. You're driving them to depression, alcohol use, and things that are endangering our high school students. And many of you who have had high school students recently, and those who haven't, it's a rude awakening that the amount of binge drinking, the amount of drugs and pills and everything that's out there. It's not like when you grew up. The drugs are much more powerful and much more dangerous. And so the second page that I've handed out to you is the increase in drug overdose data from the CDC website. And you can see that Maryland is, along with several of our other mid-Atlantic states here, is hot red with a 20% increase in opioid deaths from 2014 to 2015. Okay, so what can you do to help be a part of it? Obviously, if you say a PowerPoint presentation in health class, no student ever is going to tell you that that's effective. What they're going to say is that their ability to be resilient, to make good decisions, and to care about things has to come from a healthy, sleep-rested kid who's using their rational brain and not their irrational reptilian brain that you've left them with in a sleep-deprived state. So I encourage you to put the money back in for transportation changes. We are the 19th out of 24 in terms of the amount of spending per transportation. And I encourage you not to do the EEE program and use the money for transportation instead. I don't see why Old Mill Cluster should be getting it if Annapolis Cluster has 1/3 of the Title I schools. Please put your money into saving our high school students from the dangers that they're facing. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to the board assistant. I have one card, Robert Silkworth.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. President Korbelak, Vice President Hummer, other distinguished board members, Dr. Alada, honored guests, and elected officials. My name is Robert Silkworth. I am a 45-year teacher here in Anne Arundel County, and I am the chairperson of the High School Concerns Committee, and we are here to give our monthly report. We had our recent meeting on December the 14th. At this meeting, there was some discussion about the new proposed Latin grading policy, and I'm happy to tell you that I believe that the majority of the teachers that we talked to are in favor of that. The main focus of the meeting, however, was, again, about school or safe schools. We have had an opportunity to review the subject with Dr. McMahon and the ASI TAC Advisory Group, and we will continue that collaborative approach. I have had the opportunity to watch Dr. Alada's video about the Be Nice initiative currently in progress. Everything we do in our schools and in our school system revolves around the concept of building relationships. The relationship piece is the key to the success of our students and our schools. It was clear as I watched your video, Dr. Alada, that you are challenging all of us to be nice, and to work together and to develop campaigns in our schools to achieve the goals. We clearly are in agreement with the campaign and the need for a focus on being nice to one another. However, we would suggest in a collaborative way that we need to go further than a simple Be Nice campaign. Some of you know that I've been a sports announcer here in Anne Arundel County, high school sports, for a long time. As a sports announcer for many years, I begin every event with the following message. Ladies and gentlemen, as every team or each team represents their respective schools, we remind you that honoring the values of sportsmanship is the essence of every athletic contest. We ask all fans to show respect for players, respect for coaches, respect for officials, and of course respect for those around you. Players, coaches, and fans, let's all remember to respect the game. This actually comes from the MPSSAA, and we've been using that for a long time. I think that we need a similar message sent to our schools each and every day. It might read something like this. Students and staff, as we begin the school day, we would like to remind everyone that honoring the values of good citizens is the essence of each day we spend in our school learning and growing together. We ask all students and staff to please show respect for one another, both in and out of the classroom. Please respect your teachers, your students, your classrooms, and of course, please show respect for yourselves. We thank you in advance. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that there is a great amount of frustration and stress in some of our schools. The great news is we can eliminate that stress and that frustration with a campaign that not only focuses on being nice, but also on being respectful at all times. Be nice, show respect. Ladies and gentlemen, I usually end with kudos. Today, I decided that that's going to go to Dr. Alotto. Dr. Alotto, your comments regarding hope were awesome and right on point. Students, communities, they present us with diverse and intense needs. It is challenging more so than ever to meet these needs. We do need the resources to make sure that all of our students believe that there is hope for them and their future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay. I understand our budget office has some additional comments on the fiscal year operating and capital budget.
Correct. So we'll circle back to 3.01, 3.02.
Good morning. For the record, Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, joined by Mr. Matthew Stansky, Director of Financial Operations. Here to present item 3.01, which is an information item for the Board of Education regarding the Superintendent's recommended FY 2018 operating budget. The recommendation is, as Dr. Alotto indicated earlier, $1.16 billion. As is customary, today is simply an introduction. It is the board taking receipt of the superintendent's recommendation. We understand that it's a monumental task to carry the superintendent's recommendation to what ultimately will be the board's recommended budget going forward. To facilitate that process, there will be two public hearings held. One will be on Tuesday, January the 8th at Old Mill High School at 6 p.m. The other will be on Thursday, January the 12th at the Parham Building here, also at 6 p.m. The board will have the opportunity to receive a much more formal and in-depth presentation from the superintendent and staff at a public budget workshop that will be held here in this room on Tuesday, January the 17th, also at 6 p.m. That will be an ample opportunity to be able to exchange information, questions, etc., with the superintendent and staff, and again, receive that much more in-depth line-by-line presentation. That work ultimately will culminate in a vote that this board will be asked to take on the 15th of February to adopt your budget, both the operating and capital budget, that will then be transmitted to the county executive, which has to occur no later than March the 1st. So in light of that, it will be the 15th of February that we intend to bring the budget for your consideration. The high-level overview of the budget, as indicated before, that Dr. Alotto is bringing forward, has a net year-over-year increase of $43 million, FY18 over FY17, which represents a 3.84% increase. with that, the budget sources would be essentially as follows. The county government would supply approximately 58.3% of our fiscal resources. The state of Maryland would supply approximately $30.9 million of our total resources. The federal government would furnish approximately $3.7 million of our operating budget resources. A combination of local resources and fund balance would supply approximately 4.1% of our total resources. The Food and Nutrition Services Fund would aggregate approximately 2.9% of our resources, and about 0.1% of our resources would come from other sources. So the exhibit before you disaggregates from those various funding sources, and a pie chart at the bottom of that page shows the funding sources. In your board packet is a little bit of a worksheet that you can access as you begin to take a look at the budget. This aligns with the information that Dr. Orlado delivered earlier today. We don't intend to go through them in a line-by-line fashion because, in fact, that will be our intention when we hold that in-depth workshop. However, the highlights of that sheet essentially are as follows. We are anticipating, the superintendent is requesting and recommending an unrestricted increase of $54.7 million. That is going to be offset by an approximately $11.7 million decrease in restricted funding sources. That is how we arrive at that $43 million recommendation that the superintendent is bringing forward, again, that 3.84% increase. There essentially are four major elements to the superintendent's request, as he touched on. The four major elements are as follows: about $15.6 million for compensation-related enhancements for those represented by bargaining units and those otherwise unrepresented. A $20.5 million increase in the revenue to support the healthcare fund and help us address the structural deficit that we currently face in that fund. Approximately $7 million to support our contract and charter schools. Of that, approximately $6.8 million, in fact, will be focused on the Monarch contract school that will be opening up here in August in Annapolis. The remaining $11.6 million is to support approximately 123 positions that will help us move forward our goals in terms of rising enrollment figures, addressing various academic needs, supporting the emotional and social needs of our students, as you heard, and the families of those students. We remain available between now and the workshop to begin addressing any questions you have. Again, we'll be bringing that to you in a much more detailed fashion. So with that, and in the interest of time today, we'll curtail our formal presentation on the operating budget. Would the board members have any questions?
Not at this time.
So turning to item 3.02, similarly, the capital budget, again, being brought forward for information only, is a $238.6 million capital budget today. As you know, the capital budget was brought to the Board of Education back in September for ratification and recommendation to be forwarded to the state. The budget that the superintendent is recommending this morning to you on item 3.04 is directly analogous to that was brought forward to you in September. There is no additional projects that have been added. None of the priorities have been changed, so it is essentially the same CIP in the same order that this board weighed and considered back in September. There's been some minor adjustments to some of the pricing of some of the projects based on information we learned. So, for example, in working with the state, we identified that some of our projects are eligible for some additional state funding. And again, we'll go through the nuances of that when we have the opportunity to go through that detailed budget. But again, of that $8.6 million capital budget that Dr. Orlado is bringing forward, a full $176 million of that is for those large capital projects at Manorview, High Point, Cromwell, Jessup, Arnold, Edgewater, Tyler Heights, Richard Henry Lee, and Crofton Area High School. Additionally, $7.5 million for pre-K and kindergarten additions at 2 schools, that being Park and Shadyside. A $1.1 million renovation project at Carey Wheaton to facilitate that school opening up as a early learning center for our youngest students. $7 million to address the open space classroom enclosure projects at both Brockbridge and Shadyside. And then finally, $6 million for classroom additions at Marley and Solly. And with that, we'll conclude our brief presentation regarding the capital budget this morning.
Mrs. Birch.
Thank you. I just have a logistics question. I guess it's 2 parts. First, have we ever changed our capital budget between the September vote and the February vote before? In your recollection? Because I can't remember.
No, ma'am. Again, typically it's just a technical refinement, so
Okay.
it's a refinement of the dollars. I don't recall the board either reorganizing
Right.
or reprioritizing the budget. That heavy lifting is really done by you and your colleagues in September when we had the formal budget workshops, et cetera, on the capital budget.
So the second part of my question then is, what would the implications be with the county, with our funding sources, with the county and the state, if for some reason that list changed between the time we submitted it to the state and county for approval in September and then when we vote on it in February?
So that question has 2 parts to it. It will not at all impact the state consideration of it because that window is essentially closed. So any alteration that you made that would modify projects that you're requesting from the state would essentially have no effect because they would not be eligible for consideration until next October of 2017. Okay. The second part of our budget, though, is funded by the county government. So that window is still before us. So any alterations that you made that would create requests that were solely funded by Anne Arundel County government certainly could be, I believe, considered procedurally.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Nally.
Well, as this is my last budget, I have been always interested in the EEE program expansion. And so within the next budget, January, February, I'm not in a rush, but I think the new board members, I remember last year, or I can't remember when the last time we had a presentation to the board explaining, number one, how EEE, how the option works, how our plans for expansion. I know it's for O'Mill this year. I've been begging for the Annapolis schools for a while. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, as Dr. Arlotto knows, but I would like the new board members to be aware of the impact that has had, and I would like in the future, prior to this, to have a presentation so newer board members understand the impact on the elementary schools and the successes we've had, because we've now had it. When did it start? We started and it's moved
3 years ago.
3 years, I think. So, you know, and it's I know in the way of our budget, not a huge, but it is a pretty significant part.
Yes, ma'am. If it serves the board, I'll make the suggestion that during the workshop, we'll build a small presentation on just that, where you can, and any of the public that is there to listen, but for the board members to, we'll give you some of the specifics and time to answer questions.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to action items. Item 5.01 is administrative personnel appointments, and we don't have any this meeting. The next section is policy revisions, and the first 4 are first readings. 5.02, financial management goals code DA.
Good morning, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel for the record. Our first policy, the Division of Financial Operations brings policy DA, Financial Management Goals, to you for first reading. This policy was last revised on November 20th, 1989. This updated policy establishes financial management goals and objectives for Anne Arundel County Public Schools to support the development of prudent financial management policies and procedures. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we can answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any board questions, or is there any public comment? All right, so that'll be up on the website.
Yes.
The next one is 5.03, staff conduct, distribution of materials, and oral communications to or through students, GAE.
The Employee Relations Office brings policy GAE, staff conduct, distribution of materials, and oral communications through students to you for first reading. This policy was last revised on October 5th, 1994. The updated policy provides guidance regarding expectations of staff conduct concerning communication with students related to employee and union issues. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we can answer any questions you may have.
I just had one. I know in the past, especially for our high school students, when they see things in the news regarding union issues, they've asked questions in class of their teachers. So will teachers be advised on how to handle that if they're not really supposed to be talking about that during the school day?
For the record, Jessica Kutchis, Executive Director of Human Resources. We have, in working on this policy, spoken with the Office of School Performance about how to handle that and when what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for a school conversation. So we'll continue to work with that office to ensure that the teachers and the administrators get the guidance they need once this policy is published.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. Item 5.04, strikes and refusal to work, policy GAAA.
The Employee Relations Office brings policy GAAA, strikes and refusal to work, to you for first reading. This policy was last revised on November 7th, 1990. The updated policy provides guidance regarding employees attempting to strike or collectively refusing to work through other means. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we can answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any board questions. Is there any public comment? Okay. Item 5.05 is the National Association Meetings GBN policy.
The Employee Relations Office brings policy GBN, National Association Meetings, to you for first reading. This policy was last revised on November 7th, 1990. The updated policy provides guidance for employees represented by bargaining units requesting an opportunity to attend meetings held by professional associations during the work year. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment. We can answer any questions you may have.
I just had one. I assume we're changing it from national meetings to state, local, and national meetings. It would cover a broader range of meetings. And we're talking about not having to charge a staff member leave if they attend professional meeting, correct?
Correct. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So if we're not charging them leave, are we expecting them to produce proof that they attended the meeting? Like when we go to our national board meeting, there's a certificate of continuing education units that we can get a printout to show which sessions we attended.
So currently, this practice is handled through the Office of Employee Relations, and when there is a request, the Director of Employee Relations reviews it and requires or does not require, depending on the event and how I think publicly it is advertised, et cetera. Because I think specifically with like the MSEA conference, I don't believe that we require paperwork for that. I think most other conferences where it's sort of one or two people attending, typically that director does require that. So she currently reviews each and every situation and then provides approval or not.
Is there any public comment on this item? All right, the next set of policies are second readings. 5.06, Grading Code II.
For the record, I am Jessica Kutchis, Executive Director of Human Resources, formerly representing the Legislative and Policy Office. During the 30-day public comment period for this policy, we received 58 comments regarding our recommended changes from valedictorian and salutatorian honors to the Latin honors recognition. These comments fell into three general areas: those who supported the move to the new Latin honors recognition, those who were against the move to the new Latin's honor recognition, and those who favored the new honors recognition along with the existing valedictorian and salutatorian system. The comments, which were forwarded to the board earlier this week, provide a public response to this policy change. As we reviewed the comments, we felt it would be helpful to the board and the public to further explain the reasons why we are not recommending to keep both systems in place. In short, the valedictorian and salutatorian race is a pressured Pac 1 that is all too often has students focusing their course selection solely on weighted courses and grade point averages and not on what is best for their futures. For example, if a student is in the hunt to be a valedictorian or salutatorian, he or she will likely not take an internship for credit because that class will not provide the weighted grade that the student needs to boost his or her GPA and remain in the hunt for valedictorian or salutatorian. However, an internship can be a crucial and invaluable avenue for a high school student to get real-world on-the-job experience and make great contacts for future employment. So instead of an internship, these students often leave school for the day after 1 or 2 periods full of AP classes. Likewise, instead of staying in school and taking an elective course like photography, guitar, or an art class, that may enhance their overall experience and round out their high school career in a healthy and creative way, students are ending their day without consideration of such opportunities in order to not risk any detriments to their GPA with unweighted classes or experiences, like internships, solely because those courses do not contribute to their ability to be first or second in their class. Additionally, principals have seen cases of students routinely trying to one-up each other with the number of AP courses taken each year, again, solely in the effort to be number one. And even students have asked to drop courses after they've received a B on a test or project, so there is no record of that course on their transcript. These are just a few examples. There are others, one of which is captured very well by a 2006 graduate whose comment can be found on page 13 of the packet that was sent to you. All of it comes about because of a system that pits students against each other instead of students against a standard as the Latin honor system does. As our school system continues on its journey to elevate all students and eliminate all gaps, it is critical to look to support our students' academic endeavors as well as their physical and developmental well-being at every step along the way. As we move further down the road in this journey, we have enhanced and improved our K-2 curriculum in ways that promote wellness for our youngest students. The Latin honors recognition is a natural progression in this continuum, and our goal as it would provide the same focus and value on student achievement balanced with student wellness. This would complete for students at the end of their K-12 education by honoring excellence without compromising health. We're pleased to answer any questions you have at this time.
Ms. Sasso?
You mentioned that there were 3 levels of comment. Those that were in favor, those that were against, and those that wanted to keep both systems. Who got the most positive comment?
So unfortunately, when we analyzed the comments, we couldn't break them down specifically into just 1, 2, or 3 because they often overlapped. So as you read through the comments, you will see that in some cases they'll say, well, I like this about the valedictorian system and this about the cum laude system, but it wasn't a clear cut between the 3. So I don't have a clear cut analysis on which comments fell into which buckets.
Mrs. Birch?
Thank you. I know we went over this when you introduced the policy, but can you remind me again, this was sort of calculated to include a certain percentage of our students at each level, and I saw, that it's 20% overall that would end up being recognized, about 1 out of 5. But what was the breakdown then between summa cum laude, magna cum laude, and cum laude? I know
take
you
that,
know
Ms.
this off the
Burge.
top of your head.
I believe it was 4 to 5% summa. You have it? Let me go with my trusty colleague, Michelle Batten. 4 to 5%, thank you, for summa, 4 to 5% magna, and then 10% cum laude.
Okay, because I had noticed that a lot of the comments were concerned about dumbing things down and giving trophies to everyone. So, I mean, that right there says you're not giving something to everyone, that even that top honor is still only 4 or 5%. I've been in support of this for a long time because of situations like the person who graduated from Severna Park High School in 2006 mentioned, where there were 2 students who were taking flute and violin, and for 3 years they were all on the same level, and then in the last year the all-state violinist decided to drop violin to take an extra AP class so that they could be those thousandths of a point higher than the person who continued to play the flute. And those, to me, are the things that we're trying to avoid. And so I understand why people like the idea of having a valedictorian. It's a great honor. But when you're unhealthily pitting students against each other, there's a difference between healthy competition and unhealthy competition. And I feel like we have encouraged in our school system for the past 5 or 10 years, as we encourage more and more AP classes, unhealthy competition. And to me, this is an important way to still recognize those amazing students who are summa cum laude. They're the best. But not have people quibbling over that thousandth of a point to be number 1. And it's my understanding that we could do this so that we still have class ranks and students would still be able to send a class rank to a college if a college requested one. So it's not like the ranks would be gone. So the person who is number 1 could still tell their school that they're applying to that they're number 1. They just wouldn't be assigned a valedictorian. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think some people thought that it's dumbing it down when really it's trying to save our kids. Because, mine myself are in middle school and high school now, and I can see one in particular of them participating in the race. And that's not something I want for her. She wouldn't be allowed to. But, it's not a good situation for kids.
Mr. Graning.
Thank you. I guess this is a question and a comment, and maybe I'll start with the question. If the class ranks will remain discernible under the proposed system, how does that, and those ranks will be discernible to colleges and students, how does that eliminate any purported stress or unhealthy competition? It seems that people who kind of have this within them to want to be number 1 are still going to do that if the number 1 is discernible and they can, tell their mom and dad about it or tell a college about it. So I frankly have to say I'm not persuaded that eliminating the traditional designations of valedictorian and salutatorian are going to reduce so-called unhealthy competition if the class ranks are still discernible. And, you all can address that. But again, going back to the first time this was presented, before the public comments came in, I initially asked, are there other systems that have done both? And again, there was no expectation that you would necessarily come to that first presentation with such research. But again, on my own, I was able to determine that Durham, North Carolina, a large school system just this year, adopted the 3-tiered Latin honor system, but maintained the traditional valedictorian and salutatorian honors. And I understand the comment that it's kind of hard to dissect the 15 single-space pages of comments, but if you read them, and I'd like to share some of these with the public, I do think that they are if you have to put a number on them, overwhelmingly in favor of maintaining valedictorian and salutatorian with the adoption of Latin honors. And some of the specific comments were, quote, the new system should be implemented in conjunction with the traditional valedictorian system to promote drive for academic rigor. First, I'm opposed to the elimination of the current system of honoring a class valedictorian and salutatorian. If you want to add another recognition policy, go ahead, but removing the valedictorian and salutatorian is a big mistake. I have two issues with this change. Many schools use both valedictorian and salutatorian in addition to the Latin honors program at graduation. I believe this would be a better approach. Why can't both be done? That's kind of hearkening back to my initial question when you made the presentation a few weeks back. I do not see why adding the cum laude designations means we have to do away with valedictorian and salutatorian. Please reconsider this aspect of the new policy and regulation and reinstate the valedictorian and salutatorian honors. I like the idea of the Latin honors designations to acknowledge those students who are performing at a high level, but I have mixed feelings about eliminating the valedictorian and salutatorian honors. While I'm not opposed to introducing the Latin honor system, I am opposed to getting rid of the valedictorian. Do not get rid of valedictorian and salutatorian. Double exclamation. That said, the cum laude program is a step in the right direction and should have been instituted sooner. I like the idea of the cum laude recognition, but why get rid of naming a valedictorian and salutatorian? I agree with the addition of honors for cum laude through summa cum laude, but I believe the designation of valedictorian and salutatorian should remain for years to come. I think if you had to put a number on them, that was the clear majority in terms of the public comment. And I think the fact that the large majority of comments came in with that response when that wasn't even something that was on the table means that we should really kind of stop and pause and think about, why these concerned students and parents are coming forward with these views. And I made some comments at our last meeting. I'm not going to reiterate all of those, but I will say that there is, again, a very long tradition, as you all are well aware as educators. You're professional educators, I'm not, but there's a very long tradition in this country of naming valedictorians and salutatorians, and those distinctions remain with those individuals throughout their academic and professional careers, and we should really pause before we take away that opportunity from 26 of our graduates each year, especially, frankly, as they go on to academic and professional careers that we hope for many of them will take them well beyond our county. And again, just not to reiterate everything I said last time, but just think about some of these names. Notable high school valedictorians, including Alicia Keys, Cindy Crawford, Jodie Foster, Weird Al Yankovic, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. Seuss, Paul Robeson, and Kevin Spacey. Notable high school salutatorians, including Albert Einstein, Carrie Underwood, Michelle Obama, Jimmy Carter, John F. Kennedy, John Wayne, and Connie Francis. And I don't know why, especially if the class ranks are still discernible, and maybe you can address how you think this so-called unhealthy competition is going to be dealt with if the class ranks are still discernible. But I don't understand why we would allow the class ranks to still be discernible, but take away these honors that people could carry with them for their whole lives, and why we'd be doing that to people from this county when so many other counties would still be maintaining them.
So thank you, Mr. Grannon. There, you put a lot on the table. I don't know that we have all afternoon to go through all of those pieces that you put on the table. I'll react to a couple of those if you don't mind. One is that you talk about is the class rank still discernible? And it is in our plan, but it doesn't have to be. I would gladly entertain the idea of doing away with the class ranking altogether, like Montgomery County Public Schools have done. They don't publish a class rank. They don't produce the report. But we've chosen to do that, at least for the time being, because as we talk to students and some admission counselors in colleges, that there are certain scholarships and certain universities, like our military universities, Navy, Army, Coast Guard, and the like, that want that class rank on an application. Many colleges and universities ask for it, but it's not a required piece of information. But there are some that require it, and particularly for scholarships. And so we will still make it available. We'll run a report, but it won't be discernible in terms of it will no longer be published on a student's transcript. We'll no longer have those lists published. But if a student comes forward to their counselor and says, I'm applying for X scholarship and I need my class rank, and they show the form to their counselor, the counselor will be able to go to a report and find that number so the student can put it on there. So it won't be discernible to the public, but it will be on a case-by-case basis. That's our plan. The other is that we certainly could do both, right? And as you say, Durham, and I think we reached out and actually talked to some of the folks in Durham, North Carolina, as they are going through this process. But one of the things that you said, Mr. Grant, is you said that it is a long-honored tradition in the country, to paraphrase, that we have a long-honored tradition of recognizing and celebrating our number one and number two at the high school level. And I'm not sure that because it's a long-honored tradition, is the right thing to do. Right? Do we keep doing it just because it's always been that way? Because the way we educate kids and our students and the things that the programs and initiatives that they're involved in, many by choice, are so different now than they were 10 years ago or 15 years ago or when you were in high school or when I was in high school. Back then, the course of study was very much the same. We sort of went through the same basic paths, right? And even as my parents were growing up, and my father had the opportunity to go to either in his high school in Jersey City, New Jersey, as part of an Italian immigrant family, he was told, well, you can either go into the college track or the career track. And that was it, right? And his counselor chose the career track and told him he needed to go into the career track. He fought that urge, and he was the first in his family to go to college and ended up becoming the director of the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But back then, there were very few choices for our students. So it was much easier to compare the students in the work that they did, right? Because the pathways were so similar. And so you could really, it was more easily to discern who was number one and number two in a class. But that's not the case anymore, and certainly not in Anne Arundel County. Our students have so many more choices, not only across the school system, but within their individual schools. Like a South River High School, where they've got they have the STEM program and non-STEM program. And that was purely by luck because those students that were in the STEM program got in through a lottery, right? North County High School has the same, right? They have some students are in one program and another, then we've got PVA programs. And we've got BEMA programs, and we've got students, and so it's hard to compare the successes of those students when they've taken different routes. So how do I really compare a number one in those programs versus a number two? And the difference between number 2 and number 10 is probably 2 or 3 hundredths of a point. And so we like the idea of really celebrating those students and pushing the academic rigor, which includes the AP and honors classes and IB classes, because it's part of a weighted grade point average to recognize all those students. So times have changed, right? And I appreciate you pointing that out, because the way we deliver instruction and what we engage our students in is so very different. And I think it's hard to make a comparison between the student that is in the BEMA program and the student that is not, because of the opportunities they may be afforded or not afforded, both during the school day or after school, or field trips on weekends, or guest speakers that come in to speak to them that don't speak to some of the other students. And so again, likewise, the example of internships. We're trying to build, I would like to have 100% of our students by the time they finish school in an internship. We're up to 40% now. And they will tell you, those who are involved in internships will tell you how awesome an experience it is. But it doesn't better their GPA. But it does better their experience as they move on to college or the work world or the military or wherever they choose to go. Students that go off to the community college or a four-year college, they take those as pass-fail classes. It does not contribute to their GPA, yet we have the best community college in the state of Maryland, and I want to encourage more students to take courses at our community college. And so those are just some examples, online or others, that our students have so many more choices. How about our CAT programs, where they're not earning advanced quality points in our CAT North and CAT South programs,
But surely those students are going off and doing some incredible things and winning incredible awards, like the students that we recognize, the program we recognize today at Cat South in the Oracle program, database management. It's just phenomenal, but that doesn't contribute to their GPA to get them to that 1 and 2 spot. And I want to allow students to feel free to take the things, because one of the things that we pride ourselves on, Mr. Grant and members of the board, is we pride ourselves on providing opportunities for students. I want to provide as many opportunities, and I want them to take full advantage of it. Thank you.
Mrs. Summer.
A couple of questions about policy. When y'all were formulating this, what were some of the community and parent groups that you approached that, to run this by and to vet this through?
Right. So we vetted it through, and I'm going to try and remember all the names. I apologize if I forget some, but the CAC, PIAC, the Anne Arundel Council of PTAs, Teen Advisory, Teachers Advisory, TAC, high school principals, ASI TAC, staff throughout this building. I'm trying to think. CRASC, thank you very much. We went to them several times on this.
So to get that to get the feedback from all different aspects of the school system, from parents to students to staff. And then I have a question on, and this came up, I think this in some of the comments, that maybe to clarify. So students who would could receive the cum laude recognition must have a greater than or equal to 3.4 unweighted GPA. From some of the comments I'm reading, I think there's some confusion that that perhaps some people are thinking that if their GPA is a weighted, is a 3.6, and they've had some honors classes, that they would not qualify for cum laude because it's not an unweighted one. And I think that might need to be clarified, because I saw that come up in the questions that people are saying, well, I wouldn't make cum laude, even though I have a 3.6 because it's weighted. And that may be something we need to clarify in the policy or put out there, because it would be any student who has a 3.4 or above, whether they were taking no honors classes or a mixture of honors and regular classes. Correct. They would still qualify for that. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President. I've got two questions, and the first one may be an unfair question right now that deserves some follow-up. I know many of our graduating seniors are awarded scholarships prior to graduation. They're applying through most of their senior year, and they have the award ceremonies, in April or May as they're awarded. The question, and why I think it's unfair to ask, at least to get an answer today, is if we know of any of the scholarships, and it's hard because there's probably some group in Nebraska that asks, 1 out of 100 or so, but do we know if there are a large number of scholarships that are awarded late that do ask for a ValSal distinction, if there's a checkbox there, and if that's going to have any bearing on whether someone may earn or not earn a scholarship. I'm just curious if that was a factor here, because I don't want any of our students to be disadvantaged when they're competing against Howard County or when they're competing against Baltimore County, at least for now. I know Montgomery has already changed, and then certainly as they're competing for scholarships with students from other states. As I asked last time when this came up on first reading, I don't know that higher ed and the application process to get into college is going to be a difficult, is going to bring any difficulty if we do make this change and eliminate ValSal. But I'd like to have some extra assurance that the scholarships are not going to have too much of a bearing. Again, understanding that there's always going to be a one-off or an outlier, but if there are any major ones, that we can just confirm that our students won't be at a disadvantage. And again, I don't expect that answer today. The second question, we've made reference to CRASC a couple of times, and it's funny, this corner of the board, we've got current CRASC member and 2 former
members here. So the CRASC opinion in this is important to me. And I don't know, I don't want to put Ms. Dyson on the spot or even Ms. Williams unless she knows, but I would be curious to know whether CRASC has taken a formal position on this. And I know that in taking some of these formal positions, there's a lot of dialogue and debate among the students during that process, and at least knowing that I think would be helpful to me.
I don't know if the president, Scott Howarth, would want to speak or confer with the second vice, Christina Dyson, before coming up if they have something to say. I think that that's more of their position to speak on it since they're representing CRASC, and I'm not just representing CRASC, I'm representing all students of Anne Arundel County, so I think that would be better for them.
Hi, for the record, I'm Scott Howarth. I'm the president of CRASC. CRASC has been dealing with this issue for the past few years, and we have been unable to come to a consensus wholly. The controversy is mainly between whether we want to do cum laude alone or whether we want to do cum laude and val sal. We're entirely in support of cum laude. It's just whether we want to do that separate or with val sal. So we do not have an official stance at the moment. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sasso?
I want to make a little rebuttal to what Dr. Arlotto said, because the standards of the United States education throughout the world has gone down. We do not stand at the same level that we stood years back, even though we could have all of this academic rigor and all of these great classes that the school system has. You know, we cannot stand here and say we are standing at the top of the world at this moment. So I cannot see either getting rid of long-honored traditions which the United States has had, that throughout the years, the val sal has proved to be outstanding. I understand that there are students that basically go completely out of the way, and I agree with the cum laude system, okay? But I think we should keep both of them just because, you know, we have traditions, and no matter how we put it, traditions, the world, customs just go around. Sometimes they're here, and it goes all around, and they do come back. Okay? And our educational system is not the best educational system in the world for us to start getting rid of long-honored traditions because we think it would be better for a student. I think any person, whether they are at work or they are a student, basically should have challenges. And a person himself or herself decides what they want to do with their life. The parents might not want them to basically compete for the valedictorian or the cum laude, but a child inside of himself or himself has that drive of where he or she wants to go. And I don't think it's fair to basically tell a child that, you know, we are trying to make everybody happy or 20% happy when a child basically wants to be number one or number two. You know, I agree it should be both of the systems.
Mr. Granin?
I'll just be brief because obviously this is not the meeting at which we're going to vote on the proposed policy change. Dr. Arlotto, I very much appreciate the thoughtfulness of your response. I just want it to be abundantly clear to everyone listening to this now. There's not anything in anything I said or I certainly intended to say to question the sincerity of your beliefs and those of your team behind the proposed change. What I'm questioning is the efficacy of this policy in achieving that. And I'm just going to be blunt. I'm not persuaded to hear that, oh, at some time in the future, we might revisit the class rank issue. I think, frankly, the reason it wasn't addressed now is because that would be amazingly unpopular, particularly given the high rate of applications to service academies in this county. And I'm not persuaded that, oh, we'll deal with that later. If we have class ranks, they're going to be discernible. We're talking about a handful of students here. They're going to be able to get those numbers. They're still going to talk about them. They're still going to stress over them. And if someone has it within them to not take photography because they want to be absolutely number one and there's a way to still be number one, they're going to do that. So if we're going to fix it, we need to fix it and not be, you know, half in and half out. And if your team has communicated with the Durham school system on this issue, I think that we all want to know the substance of their response, when we vote. So maybe that's something that can be addressed at the next meeting. But there's no question I'm definitely in favor of broader recognitions for, and I didn't address this in the public comments, but just to show that I am in agreement with Ms. Burge, for example, 20% absolutely is where we want to be in terms of honoring people who've worked hard in school. The top 20%, that's something special. And I think, again, that is generally in accord with what's done throughout education at college level as well. My view, though, is that we don't have to abandon the valedictorian and salutatorian honors in order to give that broader recognition to a wider swath of our hardest working students. So, again, keep an open mind. Today's not the vote, but that's where I'm going. And again, I think that's where the large majority of the public comments were going as well.
Dr. Frank?
I'd just like to make a few comments that, we live in the United States of America. It's a competitive society. And if we don't want to recognize excellence, I think that's a problem. And I'm concerned that we don't recognize some folks that have gone above and beyond the call of duty. I think that's a big mistake.
I just had a couple questions. When do we determine the final ValSal right now? Is it after the first semester senior year, or is it junior year?
End of the second semester.
It's not until the school year is ended.
Correct.
So when students are applying to colleges, they have no idea if they're going to be ValSal.
It's your current status as of the end of the first semester.
So a student who's applying to colleges in August before their senior year has begun,
correct.
They're claiming ValSal even though they might not end up as ValSal.
When we have transcripts of students come out, it's their current place.
Which could then change for the final graduation ceremony.
Correct.
Okay, so they apply to college with whatever their class rank is showing right now on their transcript. If they apply in August, as many of our high achieving students will.
Should.
So your class rank is on the transcript right now. If we're not going to have it on the transcript, is this something that can be revealed at the end of the junior year to a student as they're getting ready to apply to college, but not available to a freshman or a sophomore who's, if we went with both?
Okay, correct. So we could not put it on the transcript.
Right.
And there is a place on college applications now, as you moms and dads, if you haven't done it already, you work with your children, where does your school system make it available, yes or no? That is an option. However, if it is a requirement, then the student could go to the counselor and achieve the ranking.
Okay, so I'm just trying to avoid the 8th grader, the 9th grader who's already setting their sights on being valedictorian #1 in the class, calculating to the 100th degree what they're at every step along the way, as some of our students do, if they're not allowed to see their class rank until it's time to apply to college, because that's where it really matters in certain scholarships in certain colleges. Okay. That's all I have.
Just one thing that might be useful in response to the college admissions process that I think was really informative and a good discussion at the policy committee, and since everyone didn't have the opportunity to hear it, one of the suggestions as part of that committee was that we work with juniors to say you're on track for this level of the Latin honors, so they could actually use that in their college application process. And the person who brought it up was a parent who recently went through the process and said this would be a great thing for my son to be able to put on his resume, or whatever required information the college admissions are asking for, to include that. So that was sort of seen as a positive when we discussed it at the policy committee. That would be an additional thing a student could be recognized for and include in their college admissions.
And to encourage them not to have a senior slide. Yes. All right, is there any public comment on this item? So we will bring this back on the 18th for a vote?
Yes.
Okay. Item 5.07 is a second reading on student publications, code JCB. And we didn't have any, no presentation, no public comments on this one. Are there any board questions or comments on this? Is there any public comment? Okay, so that will also be back on the 18th?
Yes, correct.
And then item 5.08 is student organizations, JCL. Also no public comment?
No public comment, no presentations.
Is there any public comment now? Okay. And that'll be back on the 18th?
Yes,
as
correct.
well. All right, so the other two policies are third readings, and they are up for action. The first one is item 5.09, graduation requirements, IIC. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy IIC, subject to final correction for style and format.
So moved. Second.
Are there any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Policy is approved, 900. And the third reading is 5.10, graduation activities, IID. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy IID, subject to final correction for style and format.
Any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next action item is 5.11, the second quarter operating budget fund transfer for FY 2017. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor?
Aye.
We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the second quarter operating budget fund transfer for FY 2017 to be submitted to the County Council.
And we have a presentation. No.
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer.
Matt Stansky, Director of Financial Operations.
And as is customary, we bring at this time of year a second quarter budget transfer request for the board's consideration before transmitting it with your approval to the county executive and the county council for adoption. We work on an appropriations budgetary basis here in Anne Arundel County, and therefore we essentially need legal authority of the governmental unit, in this case Anne Arundel County government, to be able to expend funds or revenues. As such, when we begin the year, we make our best estimates, best educated guess on where the budget's going to be, both us and the county collectively. But then as the year goes on, for example, we apply for and win grants. There's other adjustments to the budgets that were not anticipated when the budget was struck in June for the current fiscal year. And so it is for that reason that we're bringing this item to your attention. If you go to the first page beyond the cover sheet, that essentially disaggregates the request. So since the initial adoption of the budget, we have been able to aggregate approximately $3.1 million of additional federal funds. As you know, federal funds are generally targeted and restricted for explicit purposes. The details are included further into the presentation, but we're going to cover this at a high level. We have had a modest reduction in state funding of about $665,000. Similarly, our local revenue sources have required a modest downward adjustment of $286,000. We have an approximate $2.4 million increase in revenues from other sources. And then most importantly, we're seeking your permission to access $2 million of our fund balance that would enable us to transfer that into our healthcare self-insurance fund to lend some aid, temporary aid to that fund that's suffering some fiscal duress at the moment. So in totality, we're asking for your permission to, upon the superintendent's recommendation, to go forward to the county government and work collaboratively with them to seek their approval in increasing our legal appropriation level by approximately $6,645,400. And with that, we'll conclude our brief presentation.
And I think I cut Patty off with her motion. So Patty made a motion, and do I have a second? Okay. Now we have questions, Mr. Grannon.
Just a very quick one. Can you give a little bit more explanation behind the reductions in the state and local funding?
So essentially, they're disaggregated. We have, on the unrestricted side of our budget, we basically have no reductions at either the federal or the state level. They all actually occur at the grant funded page, which is on page 3 of your exhibit. So for example, going down on page 3 in the federal category, we received $36,000 additional dollars towards our vocational education efforts. Approximately $2.1 million additional dollars. We were notified that we were eligible for additional Title I monies. We were notified that we became eligible for $753,300 for STEM. It's a DODEA, Department of Defense grant. About $160,000 notification from the federal government to support the Judy Center that we have running at our Hilltop School, and about $60,000 of other miscellaneous small monies. The reductions on the state side were mainly the non-public placements, a $500,000 reduction from the state to support our non-public students. And then you'll see that right below that, you'll see $165,000 for the Judy Center again. Mm-hmm. After the adoption of the budget, guidance came forward from the federal government to have us essentially recharacterize the money as being a federal contribution and not a state contribution. So there's an so that's not new additional money. We've essentially had to relabel it from being a state revenue source to now being a federal revenue source, and that was applied statewide. Any of the 24 jurisdictions that did receive Judy funds all had to make the exact same adjustments per guidance that we received from the federal government and that the state of Maryland concurred with. Yes, sir.
Mrs. Hummer?
Why the reduction for non-public placements?
Yeah, so that's essentially the state has decided to put all their funding for non-public placements into the unrestricted portion of the budget. So again, this is more of a transfer. So if you look at the prior page, in the general fund, the $500,000 is now worked into that portion of the reimbursement.
So they have not reduced the amount that we can use toward our non-public.
Yeah, so they're just ending the restricted grant program and putting it all in the unrestricted
We just shifted
side.
categories. Good.
Correct.
I was concerned about how we were going to make that up. So thank you.
Mrs. Burge?
Quick question that's somewhat related and somewhat not. Have we heard anything yet about what our share of the state pension one-time money might be?
No, so there's, so as you possibly read in the paper, there was some movement on that between the governor and the two presiding officers of the Senate and the House. What we are awaiting is official notification of how the mechanics of how that's going to be distributed and when. There's really 4 possible scenarios, and we're not sure which one they're going to follow yet. It could be distributed directly to the board in the current fiscal year, and we would retransmit it to the state pension office. It could be transmitted in current fiscal year directly from the state of Maryland directly to the state pension system. They can hold it and give it directly to us in our next fiscal year, and we would transmit it directly to the state pension system. Or they can hold it and they themselves can transfer directly to the state pension system on our behalf. Either way, I mean, theoretically, the money will get to where it's supposed to be, which is the state retirement and pension system. But the state of Maryland has not issued any guidance on how or when exactly that's going to happen, or how is it eventually going to be reflected in our financial statements. And we're going to have to work collaboratively. For example, if it's transferred to us, we'll have to work with the county government to do another transfer request, an appropriations request. If it's transmitted directly from the state agency to the state agency, we likely won't have to go through the appropriations process. So it's a lot of yet to be determined.
Now, if, say, for instance, it was $2 million, I'm just picking a number, out of thin air. And it has to be used for pensions. But we had to use other money for pensions before that we weren't necessarily going to have to. So then that $2 million would then become available. Is that for something else?
Theoretically, that's correct.
Okay.
However, the budget recommendation that the superintendent is putting forward to you at this time for FY18 does not, in fact, contain a line item for a pension increase, although we know one will be occurring. So we are essentially taking the value of the proceeds that the state will be distributing to us to either offset a current year or next year. So we're going to owe, because of the rise in normal costs,
right,
we're going to owe the state of Maryland additional dollars for retirement. We know that to be the case. We just don't know what the exact number is. They typically don't notify us until at least mid to late January. So yes, the monies in one way, shape, or the other would be available to do something else. That something else is to pay the pension and retirement bills in either this year or next year.
Okay. I was looking for health fund help, but
We were too, ma'am.
okay.
Nice thought, yes.
Mr. Grannon.
Quick follow-up from before. Thank you for explaining the, I guess, the difference in the projected state funds. What happened to the $286,000 in local money, that difference?
Yeah. So that is that the majority of that is lower than anticipated retiree contributions to the healthcare fund. So we make an estimate every year about what we think our retirees will contribute based on the number of retirees we have and the health rates. But of course, there's two different rates, whether you're under the age of 65 or over the age of 65. And so we, had a little more over the age of 65 who pay a lower amount than anticipated, and so we had to readjust that revenue projection downward slightly.
And is that based on some kind of contribution proportion, an 80-20, 90-10? What are the proportions?
Yeah, I believe it is 70-30. 70 district pays and 30% retiree.
Thank you.
I don't have any other questions from the board. Is there any public comment? Okay, all those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 5.12 is an action item, the ratification of the negotiated agreement between the Board of Education and the Association of Educational Leaders, AEL. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the tentative agreement between the Board of Education and the Association of Educational Leaders, AEL.
Have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, and we have a presentation.
Yes, good morning, Mrs. Corbelak, Dr. Arlato, Ms. Hummer, and members of the board. My name is Melissa Rawls, and I am the Director of Employee Relations. The negotiating teams for the Board of Education and the Association of Educational Leaders have reached a tentative agreement for FY 2017 based upon recommendations from an independent mediator. In brief, the summary of changes as agreed upon by both parties include the following. First, all Unit 2 employees will receive a 0.97% COLA effective July 1st, 2016. There's an unresolved issue regarding a prescription drug copay, which will continue to be addressed through negotiations. There was an agreement to continue the 4-day work week from June 29th, 2016 through August 9th, 2016, which already occurred. There is a pilot professional leave and telecommuting program, which has been extended through the 2016-2017 school year. And this pilot is scheduled to expire on August 31st, 2017. The value of this program ranges from a 1.15% through a 1.93% per eligible Unit 2 employee. Lastly, there was an agreement to increase the maximum number of semester hours that an employee is eligible to receive for reimbursement of a doctoral program credits. And this will be completed while the employee is employed by the board. I would like to thank Richard Kovalent, the Executive Director of AEL, and also Will Myers, who is sitting here with me today, who is the President of AEL, and the entire negotiating team, and also the board's team for their dedicated efforts. In spite of the many challenges experienced during the FY17 negotiations, ultimately the teams were able to reach an agreement which supports AEL members and their commitment to AACPS students, staff, and community. On December 6, 2016, AEL ratified this agreement. As such, I respectfully request your approval and ratification of the aforementioned summary of changes. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, President Korbelak, Dr. Arlotto, and board members. For the record, I'm William Myers, President of the Association of Educational Leaders and also principal at South River High School. Today, I have been directed by my membership to accept the terms of a contract for the 2016-2017 school year that embodies the recommendations of a mediator made after our impasse negotiations were unsuccessful. This contract does now provide for a 0.97% COLA for all Unit 2 members. Now that's not a step, that's not 1%. Why 97%, you may ask? Well, it's because our membership did not feel it was appropriate to deny compensation to the 8 most senior members of our organizations who do not have eligibility for a step. Those 8 members represent 351.4 years of dedicated service. According to your school system's budget analyst, it would have taken $14,000 in order for those 8 members to receive an equivalent step. Your negotiating team, presumably under your direction, was unwilling to consider their compensation, claiming there were no cost-saving measures available to make up the difference. This claim has a hollow ring to it. As we know, cost-saving measures were found to give non-represented groups a raise in excess of the budgeted amount last year. The fixed budget has been used as a shield, an excuse to justify this stance. Such a stance is inexcusable. It speaks volumes to my membership about how we are valued and appreciated. If this is perceived as a victory, it is a Pyrrhic one, for you've lost the goodwill and faith of many of the people who make magic happen in our schools every day. There's an undertone of concern throughout our membership. Class size, workload, compensation, benefits are issues which must be addressed. As we prepare for another round of negotiations and a new school year, it's my wish that both sides can reset their priorities and restore our members' faith in a school system we are told values our service and looks out for our best interest. I want to thank Ms. Rawls for all the sessions we had, although sometimes they were tenuous. In the end, we're on the same team and looking for the best interest of our school system. So I honor her efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any board questions? Is there any public comment?
Sorry, I've got a quick. I can't just ignore the math of something that you said. I want to make sure I understand. Did you say that this is not 1% based on something in your side's position voluntarily having it below 1%? Is that what you meant?
We have agreed to less than 1% in order to provide the compensation for those 8 members. You know, the figure presented by the board's analyst is $386,000. That only covers 1% for 321 members of my organization. To cover the other 8 members, you've got to take that $386,000 and boil it down to what that would be for all 329 members. That comes out to roughly 0.97% of a COLA.
Oh, I see. Okay.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Thank you, both. Item 5.13 is new course approvals. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of these courses beginning with the 2017-2018 school year.
Do I have a motion? All right.
Good morning. My name
Good
is
morning.
Skip Lee, and I'm the Director of Curriculum here in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We have two course proposals presented before you today. Joining me is Ms. Debbie Albert, the author of these proposals, and she's here to assist me in responding to your concerns and addressing your questions.
Mrs. Hummer.
First off, I'm thrilled about the gaming classes. I just think that's going to be a wonderful addition for our kids moving forward to keep up with today's technologies and the things that they're already interested and good in. I think that's going to be wonderful. The other class, the Career Development Preparation and Transition, which schools will that be offered in?
So out of our 12 comprehensive high schools currently, actually 13 including Phoenix, 11 of them are running a completer program called Career Research and Development. And so students take 2 credits of instruction, which prepare them for this transition, and then they earn 2 credits from actually working or interning on the job site. So that's where this is actually just an upgraded course to align with MSDE's new program. It's something that we've already been running, but this is the new version of the course, which infuses a lot more of financial information for students, a lot more preparedness on how to purchase things and budget and apply for jobs and that kind of true transition.
So this is an elective that students choose to take? Or?
It could be an elective. It could be used as part of their completer. So it is approved as an MSDE completer program, which is a 4-course sequence which allows them to meet graduation requirements.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Birch.
I love new classes. I always decide that I want to go to high school again after we get our new classes, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to dream about this again tonight, and I'll have that dream where I forget to go to school all semester and then I have my exam at the end. But because now I want to be in high school again. But I love this. You know, I know the kids that this is geared towards, and this is going to be very helpful to them. And there are a lot of college programs now that are gaming majors. I mean, it's remarkable how many are out there. So no matter where a kid is going, this can certainly be helpful to them. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Great. Yeah, it's very big in the local industry as well, which a lot of people didn't realize. But so this course is actually part of the program that we look at all of our programs that we currently run, and as they become outdated, which of course they do, we have to kind of get rid of some older programs. So this is actually taking the place of a program we closed at Cat South last year, and with work, you know, a lot of work with Anne Arundel Workforce Development and Department of Labor Licensing Regulation and all of that kind of data, this was zeroed in, and of course student interest. Simulation and gaming is one of the top things, so we're very excited about being able to offer it.
Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you both for this. I'm so glad to see and really just my thanks to you for engaging AAWDC. I was on that board for 8 years. I left them to come here, and I think they just do awesome work. And I'd really love to see the partnership that's already strong between AACPS and AAWDC continue to grow and flourish, because those opportunities for your students in particular are just going to be immense. So thank you for that. I do recall, I want to say maybe 6 months ago or so, we approved another course in the gamification area. So I know that there's going to be more in this area as the industry continues to evolve, and I just want to thank you for your openness and willingness here.
Great, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have 3 review items. Item 6.01 is the Carroll S. Parham Administration Building Telecommunication Transmission Facility. So I know we don't have a presentation. We've done all of the required meetings, but you were lonely. Nobody came to your public meeting.
Sad.
So I assume that no one had an issue with the cell tower then, that we know of. Right. Okay. Are there any board questions or comments on this item? All right. Item 6.02 is another cell tower, Hebron Harmon Elementary School telecommunication transmission facility. And you had 10 people at that meeting. And the concerns, it appeared, were why you couldn't have a sign versus the tree. Anything else that...
No, as you can tell in one of the informational sheets provided there, the property is very heavily wooded on purpose. There's a lot of tree buffers between us and our residents, and we've felt that utilizing the option of the pole that masks as a tree best blends in with the surroundings and would provide the least amount of disruption to individuals in the surrounding areas. So that's why we went with that structure there. And then additionally, the school is well positioned on the road and has an electronic marquee that is right on the road there. You can see that again in the same picture. So between the school already being well identified and wanting to blend in with the surrounding areas, we worked collaboratively with Milestone and arrived at the tree version as being the most appropriate for Hebron Harmon.
And even if it was a sign, if it was replacing the sign that's there, it's not in the right position for the tower.
Yes, ma'am,
where
that's
you
correct.
need the signal.
Unlike the one at Corcoran, it's directly on the road frontage. In this case, the pole is very far removed away from the sign. And then lastly, I mean, obviously we are within the BWI zone of consideration too, so part of the regulatory review process the Milestone will have to go through is filing for the permits, obtaining all the clearances, et cetera. So it will be scrutinized on the regulatory front as well.
Mrs. Birch?
I noticed that, as there normally is, there were some questions at the meeting about safety with the fence and, health risks and things like that. Were the folks who were there from the community at all, did they feel better after the things were explained to them, or was there still concern?
Greg Stewart, for the record. Yeah, we basically satisfied all the concerns. I mean, there were issues, everything dealing from developments around the area, APF, the casino money. It was at least over an hour of
They
discussions.
had you there, so they were going to ask you whatever questions they could.
And they did. So it started out as a cell phone meeting, and it went into a development land use meeting. So, I think they were satisfied with all the answers, and we certainly gave them references for all the health concerns. So I think we addressed all their issues.
Thank you.
So both of these towers will not be able to be constructed until the regulatory process is complete, correct?
Correct. So Milestone will file for all of the applicable permits and regulatory approvals. Once they've secured those, we'll be bringing a lease for the board's consideration, a ground lease in accordance with the master agreement that we have in place, and then upon execution of the ground lease, then Milestone, and of course having secured the required approvals, they will be allowed to proceed into the construction phase.
All right. Are there any public comments on this item? All right. Thank you. Our last review item is 6.03, the monthly financial status report. Do we have any board questions or comments? Mrs. Birch.
Just a real quick question. I know that what is November, about 42% of the way through the year, something like that. So, I always look at all the numbers based on that. Now, I know that other instructional costs are always going to be higher because all of our schools front load. I mean, you're buying things at the beginning of the school year. And I'm sure you've answered this sometime in the last 8.5 years for me, but why is maintenance of plant higher, or is that a problem?
No, it's actually because the bulk of the construction work is done during a period when the buildings are empty at the beginning of the year leading up into August and September. So maintenance expenditure rate is front loaded
in July and August.
Then it sort of goes into a steady state phase after that initial front loading.
And you've probably answered that question for me before, but that's one that I didn't retain. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. The last agenda items are 4 consent items, award of contracts, items 7.01 to 7.04. Do I have a motion to bundle them and move them from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the Board of Education award contracts 7.01 through 7.04 as listed on today's agenda.
Any board questions or comments? Any public comment? All those in favor? All right. Motion passes 9-0-0. A couple of announcements, and then we will move back into closed session. The first is that we have two upcoming budget hearings. The first is at 6 p.m., January 10th at Old Mill High School. The second one is that same week on Thursday here in Riva Road at 6 p.m. Then we have our public budget workshop where the board will work on the budget, but the public can attend and not comment. That's on the 17th of January at 6 p.m. Then our next Board of Education meeting is the next day, Wednesday, January 18th, 10 a.m. The Budget Committee is 1 hour after the board meeting ends, and the next board policy meeting is January 25th at 1 p.m. With that, I would like to wish everybody a wonderful holiday, and we will see you in the new year.
Wait a minute. Let me.
Summer.
I move that we go into closed session to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
With a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Pero sí, él mismo hace el servicio en inglés y en español.
Okay. So él mismo te traduce todo.
Ok, excelente. ¿Y ustedes, cuál es su rol o cuál es su participación dentro de este servicio?
Nosotros somos parte del equipo de transición, como somos parte de la iglesia Center Point, el servicio americano. Estamos ahora como parte del comité de transición de la iglesia Center Point Bilingual. Estamos tratando de incorporar una iglesia a la otra para formar todos una familia completa y simplemente pues añadir un servicio más, pero con el beneficio que es bilingüe.
O sea que realmente ustedes están
como dicen en inglés, ustedes están caminando lo que hablan, porque al comienzo nos contaban que la mayor dificultad de estar en este país era la adaptación, pero que ustedes tienen su mente abierta y adaptaron y adoptaron costumbres y tradiciones americanas en su vida. Y ahora dentro de la iglesia no se trata de separar dos iglesias, el servicio hispano, el servicio americano, sino de tener a toda la comunidad en un solo servicio, adaptándose mutuamente, ¿no? Porque los hispanos también influenciamos dentro de la comunidad americana.
Correcto.
Es algo mutuo y la mentalidad abierta es de las dos partes. Algo aquí interesante para nuestra audiencia, y esto es con el fin de informarlos, no tenemos ningún interés en decirles, mire, hagan esto y no hagan lo otro, pero ¿cuáles son las ventajas de ir a un servicio bilingüe comparado con ir a un servicio solamente en español?
Yo pienso que la unión familiar, si tienes un papá o una mamá o una pareja o que simplemente hable en inglés o solamente habla en español, ambos pueden unirse, la unión familiar, la unión de esa pareja. Yo creo que sería, y volvemos a lo del punto central, o sea, un punto donde dos se unen, no importa qué idioma hablen o cuál sea su preferencia, los dos pueden estar juntos ahí.
Y en el caso de los niños o de los adolescentes, ¿ellos participan también en estos servicios?
Sí, son parte de la primera parte del servicio y luego hay diferentes grupos para los niños pequeños y para los adolescentes.
Axel, no sé, ¿y para los chicos el servicio también es bilingüe o cómo es ese servicio?
No, cuando son para los chicos son más bien en inglés, más bien como están adaptados lo de la escuela en eso todo. Pero si alguno no sabe, viene, vamos a suponer, como a veces vienen muchos muchachos que no hablan como tal todavía el inglés, pues entonces se le ayuda porque el staff también habla los dos idiomas, o no hay ningún problema.
Entonces creo que es importante que invitemos a las familias nuevamente. Ustedes están ubicados en Anápolis. ¿Qué día y a qué horas es este servicio bilingüe?
El servicio bilingüe es todos los domingos a la 1 de la tarde. La iglesia está localizada de nuevo en 901 Commerce Road en Anápolis.
Así que cualquier domingo pueden llegar allí. Además de este servicio bilingüe que ocurre los domingos, ¿la iglesia tiene algún otro servicio para la comunidad hispana o este es como el primer proyecto de la iglesia?
Bueno, ellos tienen, la iglesia sí tiene tutorías, también provee servicios de interpretación, consejería y también dan deportes para los jóvenes. Entonces, en la iglesia americana, que como ahora están incorporándose a la comunidad hispana, se pensaría en un futuro añadirlo de la paz financiera, financial peace, y también un grupo de recuperación para personas con adicción a drogas o alcohol.
¿Qué sería el proyecto? ¿Es hacerlo solamente en español?
Sería para reintegrar a ambos, algo bilingüe, que pudieran asistir a ambas familias.
Entonces a ver si me lo aprendí porque me gusta repetir para que las familias sepan a dónde buscar cuando hay necesidades, ¿cierto? Luego dicen, ¿a dónde voy? Entonces tenemos una iglesia en Anápolis y además del servicio bilingüe proveen servicio de consejería, proveen un servicio, hay también deportes para los niños, hay un grupo de apoyo para personas que quieren superar las adicciones. Y me quedé.
Y entonces también dan servicios de interpretación.
Servicios de interpretación. Y
tutorías.
Y tutorías para los chicos, para hacer las tareas. Esto de tutorías y servicios de interpretación. Vayámonos por allá.
Sí.
Tutorías. ¿Qué necesita hacer una familia que dice, no sé cómo ayudar a mi niño en la tarea? ¿Y qué hacen? ¿Llaman a la iglesia o cómo es?
Pueden comunicarse con la iglesia de Center Point Bilingual, el pastor es Pedro Martínez. Se pueden comunicar con ellos para coordinar entonces lo de las tutorías.
Pedro Martínez.
Sí, Pedro Martínez.
¿Y la interpretación?
también se comunicarían con él. Él es el pastor de la iglesia bilingüe.
Pero digamos que yo soy una señora que vive en Anápolis, que acabo de llegar de Guatemala y necesito ir a una cita al médico y necesito un intérprete. ¿Es ese tipo de servicio o cómo sería?
Es un servicio, o sea, no han utilizado más bien en las escuelas, han sido intérpretes en las escuelas con los padres.
Perfecto, o sea,